very welcome back now. Government advice to avoid all non-essential travel abroad has been extended until the 20th of July. However, many flights have already resumed, so what can we expect when we do fly again? Well, travel expert Eoghan Corry was one of the first people to experience the new arrangements at Dublin Airport and on the plane when he flew to Malta last week. And he's here now to tell us what it was like to travel. Eoghan.
It's a very interesting one because Malta is quite a safe destination and very choosy about who they let in. They've let the Irish in last Wednesday. They're still considering whether to let the British in. And the reason is they have 0 cases for quite a while now. And they're watching, as is the whole of Europe, watching what happens when you open your borders.
Yeah, it's strange that you're there because I was actually in Malta at the very start of lockdown and we came home early. And I was actually very impressed at how they scaled up immediately to stop people coming in, self-quarantining, closed places. It was very, very rapid response.
They've had a total of 9 deaths, Alan, and they've had 0 cases, and they're watching for imported cases. Their dilemma is much the same as the rest of Europe's. Their tourism is about 25 to 30% of their GDP. It's about 10% of ours. So the same sort of questions about when do you open, who do you open to, they're going through that debate. They've managed their COVID-19 extremely well. And when you land here, the first thing you meet is a temperature check camera in the airport and a team of 3 medics who call aside people randomly or people that are showing up in the temperature check for further testing. And of course, the aviation experience has all changed. Masks on board is pretty much mandatory across Europe, according to the European Aviation Standards Association and the European CDC standards, which were published on June the 12th.
So, Eoghan, what was it like then when you arrived at the airport, and you've been through airports hundreds of times? Well, how is it different for you last week when you were travelling?
The big thing people would notice is masks. The second thing they'll notice is a different policy for cabin bags. Ryanair want people to take their bags on board. Aer Lingus, which I wasn't flying with, I was flying with Ryanair, they have a policy where they like to bring the bags in the hold and have less people standing in the aisle. Wearing masks on board and there is no social distancing on an aircraft according to the EASA standard, which means debates like keeping the middle seat empty, they're not happening. But what is interesting is that the aviation, the flying part of it is probably the easiest and safest part of it. A lot of the fears are around the airport experience and the busing experiences, and that's where airports have really had to step up with issues like security in Dublin Airport, where they would have 4 bays, only 2 of them are open. Arriving in Malta, a lot of temperature checking even in hotels, and waiting staff wearing masks. Very, very careful because they know that tourism is vital, but health is even more vital.
But Eoghan, when you were queuing for the plane, was there social distancing? Were people all rushing to the plane like normal?
It's quite interesting that people do have this sort of genetic thing when they see the gate open that they all rush and get crushed up close to each other. It more or less worked, and I think it will work better as the airports are open. I travelled Wednesday when there were about 10,500 people going to the airport. To put that in context, that were 4,000 was what we were doing during our skeleton service time, and it would be over 100,000 normally. The airport is marked out like supermarkets were marked out. I know a lot of viewers will have thought at the beginning, how can supermarkets manage checkout queues? It's all worked. I feel the airport system will work. When you think back at the way we had to change our airport experience after 9/11 on things like liquids, I suspect the post-coronavirus age is going to be something similar. Different airport experience and a different flying experience with a few more inconveniences, such as wearing the masks. Interestingly, 1 or 2 people who took the mask off during the flight, you're allowed to take it off to eat, but not generally. They were called out on the tannoy and not named person in row 17, but they said, please put your mask back on, and they'd said, thank you. So the airlines, the airports, everyone is taking this very, very seriously.
Now, we're being told not to travel at the moment, but that will change down the line. And when we get to somewhere, we travel to somewhere like Malta, what changes have you seen when you've been there, when you get to your hotel, for example?
It's very similar to the opening up at homes. It's hand sanitizer, because let's face it, that's where the real action is going to be. Everybody washing hands frequently. So hand sanitizer everywhere, lots of extra staff, perspex, wearing of masks. Usually the visor mask is easier for staff in a lot of the... But when you're out in the sunshine, it is much the same. The beaches will be marked off across the the major tourist destinations, to prevent crowds congregating too close together in beaches. And I noticed some of the resorts have put designated areas for vulnerable people, like for over 70s. The experience a wee bit different, but let's face it, if you're going to be safe from this virus, out in the open air with the wind blowing through your hair, cycling around Malta or on a boat and plunging in the sea, that's going to be the safer end of it. The real key, Alan, as you said, is for governments and health authorities to get their head around when it's safe to open the borders. There is a parallel universe where the Irish system, the Irish health authorities are saying it's not safe to travel, and they're going to extending that 14 days mandatory quarantine on return for another 2 weeks until July the 20th. But people are flying because what the government says is really only relevant to travel insurance. The public are buying the seats that are available at very, very good prices from the aviation industry. And the rest of Europe has had a plan, or is going through a phasing, which is very different from ours. Borders to open on June the 15th and return to normal flying in most countries, including our big destination, Spain, on July the 1st. We seem to be slower in that process. We can obsess a little bit. If we're 2 or 3 weeks behind, it isn't that big a deal. But if it gets longer than that, our inbound industry is very, very vulnerable.
And very quickly, just who was on the plane? How full was it?
It was about 70% full. What I noticed about the first flight is a lot of people who got caught the wrong side of the border when the lockdown came, because as you alluded to in your introduction, Malta locked down very, very quickly. They're very close to Italy. They were watching what was happening there. And there were a lot of long-term, long-stay people who had homes out here or apartments out here. I suspect the first few flights will have a lot of those. Very few short-term holiday makers, and that's going to take a little bit longer to return. And largely, sometimes because of the government advice, and partly because people just want to see how it works. I think when the first people start coming back and the government restrictions ease, we'll see something returning to a normal tourist season. It won't be anything like we've seen before in terms of volume. But the way the European Commission look at this, Alan, is they see European tourism as domestic tourism. They treat the entire economy as one, and the whole of South Europe is very, very heavily dependent on it.
Well, before we lose the signal there, thank you. Enjoy the sunshine, Eoghan. Looks like it's beautiful there. Thank you.
It's really hard work, Alan. I'm trying my best.
Thanks so much for joining us. And just a quick reminder that the government advice on to avoid all non-essential travel abroad has been extended for another 2 weeks, and a green list of countries is expected to be published on the 20th of July to those countries that we can travel to.